Throughout the entirety of the 2024 NFL offseason, the Detroit Lions have been making move after move to try and get ready to go after the ultimate goal of any football team in the NFL, a Super Bowl win. And we're going to talk about how they have gone all in to do just that. Stay tuned.
What are we? What makes us what we are and what we're going to be? It's grit. It's what we started with last year, guys. Doesn't matter if you have one ass cheek and three toes. I will beat your ass.
Can definitely compete with the big dogs.
10-5 end zone touchdown Detroit Lions.
You guys are unbelievable, man. I'm telling you.
We are driven by Detroit.
Hello everyone, and welcome on back to yet another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. I'm your host, David T. Pike, and as always, we're diving on in. So here's the thing, folks. When we take a look at 2024, we take a look at this upcoming season, it is painfully, plainly obvious that the Lions are gunning for a Super Bowl. That is what they're after. That is what they're going for. They're not settling for anything else other than a Super Bowl victory. Now, here's the thing. When we take a look at the Detroit Lions franchise throughout the entirety of its history, all the way up to this point in 2024, the Detroit Lions, they're a historic franchise. They've been around for quite a minute. And their franchise has a very long history, some of it that has been very rich with success. However, though, for most of the history of the franchise, it has been, sad to say, either mediocre to downright awful at points. Now, that does not mean that the Lions have not known the taste of success. They obviously have. Granted, it's been sporadic or way back in the past. Obviously, what I'm talking about is when the Lions were four-time NFL champions in the 1950s. They've also won a couple of conference titles. They've won a couple of division championships. They've gone to the playoffs multiple times. But the problem is that, however, the ability to experience that success, like I've said, has been separated by quite a lot of years in most cases, and sometimes even decades. So it's kind of an interesting mixed bag when we're talking about the Lions over, however long we want to talk about. But like I said, 2024, right now, the Lions have brought something to Detroit that has long been lacking for the city, long been lacking for Lions fans. And that's what I'm going to call as genuine hope. Not hope in general, genuine hope. And here's why I'm specifically calling it genuine hope. Because let's understand something here. Over the years, many Lions fans have had what I would like to call scant hope that things would eventually get better. That, hey, we hope that things are going to get better. We hope that things are going to turn around here, maybe with the draft, whatever the case might be. We're hoping. But here's the problem. As we all know, it was the same diamond dance almost year after year. As quickly as we would get hope again that maybe things might turn around, that hope would quickly be dashed. It would quickly go away because the same results time after time after time will be going out on the field, and it will result in disappointment. That's where the whole SOL mindset came about. That's where all those SOL fans came from. They were so embittered, they were so mad, they were so upset that the Lions had constantly let them down that there was no way you were ever going to convince them that the Lions are ever going to figure it out. But now, under Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes, with the help of Chris Spielman and the support of Sheila, the Lions have not only renewed that hope for the city of Detroit and for the Lions fans, they've now turned that genuine hope that we now have into reality, and now fans are starting to enjoy the long years of patience that they've had to endure with all of the suffering that they've had to endure along with it. It's now beginning to pay off. However, despite the great successes that the Lions have had over the last 2 years, the Lions have, as I said in the early part of this episode, they have much grander aspirations to fulfill, and that's to obtain the ultimate prize of the NFL, which is to hoist the Lombardi Trophy and to win a Super Bowl. Now, here's the thing. To even utter that phrase a couple of years ago would have absolutely gotten somebody laughed out of a room, just absolutely silly. And almost everybody in the room would have probably called that person a slappy, because there would have been nobody on this planet a couple of years ago that would have thought the Lions were ever going to be Super Bowl contenders, much less they were going to be Super Bowl contenders in 3 years, because that was just something that was never a thought. That's not something that anybody would have considered serious. Like I said, everyone would have laughed you out of the room. Well, no one's laughing now. No one's laughing at the idea anymore. In fact, people are completely serious about the Lions being a serious Super Bowl contender. I mean, you have to think about it. The Lions are now considered up there with the likes of teams like the 49ers, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bengals. Even some people would like to throw in the Eagles and the Cowboys. I personally don't, but, they still get thrown in there. Point of the matter is that the Lions are considered one of the top teams right now. They're considered a contender for the Super Bowl. Now, some may ask, how is this possible? How could the Lions make such a drastic and complete turnaround so quickly? Put it simply, it's because the Lions finally decided to go all in. And when I mean they went all in, I mean they went all in. Think about it. We first have to establish the clear difference between the Lions of now versus the past. And by doing that, we have to use it with actual physical proof. So that's where we're going to go with this. Here we go. First, we know that in the past, especially between the period of 2000 and 2020, the Lions had what I would call a particular way of handling their roster building process. The Lions, from that period of time, their roster building process was what I would like to call the quick fix phase. Pretty much what they wanted to do was they wanted to find a way to patch the roster, get a quick fix to it, and hope it was going to stick. Kind of like how you mend some pants and you think, hey, maybe this patch will work really quickly and we can just keep going on down the road. It's also what I would like to call the kick the can down the road method. Anyway, the whole point is that after the retirement of Barry Sanders in 1998, the Lions would then go on to have a playoff berth, I believe it was in 1999, and then they would have one more winning season in 2000. However, though, in 2000, the Lions went through a very, I would call it kind of weird season, because in that season they had two head coaches. They had Bobby Ross and they had Gary Moeller. In that season, Bobby Ross, he resigned halfway through the season because he felt the players weren't being, dedicated enough. He thought they were being lackadaisical. He resigned halfway through the season. Then Moeller comes in. He gets the Lions all the way to the end with, I think it was a 5-4 record. The Lions finished 9-7. And then what we find out is that William Clay Ford at the time, he gave Moeller a 2.5-year contract to remain with the team as the head coach. Well, wouldn't you know it, then Mr. Ford goes out and hires Matt Millen. Matt Millen then gets in. He fires Gary Moeller because Mr. Ford had given Millen all control over football operations. He fires Gary Moeller. He brings in Marty Morningweg. And that right there was kind of like what I would call that was kind of like the beginning of the end. Because you have to think about it here. That right there, that move of firing Moeller to bring in Morningweg, it showed the first fracture, the first step in which the Lions kind of started down this path of darkness that we would then see for the next 20 years. Because Millen, who was hired, despite the fact that Millen himself objected to being given the job, he said he wasn't ready for the job, he wasn't prepared for the job, but William Clay Ford decided to give the job to him, and what happened was Millen then decided that he wanted to try and bring the 49ers culture, that West Coast system, out here to Detroit. And that's why he went out and hired Marty Morningweg, who was the offensive coordinator of the 49ers at the time. The decision was both very peculiar and it was also scrutinized due to the nature of, well, first and foremost, how Moeller was shuffled out the door, but also how quickly Morningweg was brought in, because Morningweg had no head coaching experience, and it was kind of like, well, wait a minute, you just gave this guy a 2.5-year contract. Now you fire him, and literally like a day or two later, you've already got his replacement in the door. That seems kind of peculiar. So, that right there was kind of how this whole thing got started, and this exact principle was done over and over and over again. And it wasn't just done with Millen. It was also done with the management of the teams that was done over the next, the next couple of guys that were brought in. Because it didn't matter if it was Martin Mayhew who did it. It didn't matter if it was Bob Quinn. They all did the exact same thing. They were acting in haste to get the guy or get the personnel that they wanted. They were being impatient. And that was a trend that we continued to see out of Lions management over the next 20 years from 2000 to 2020. And they would be impatient. They would try to move as quickly as they could rather than taking the time to get things right. And there is something to be said about patience. And when you think about it, over the last 2 decades that we're talking about, the Lions being impatient was how they were handling their business affairs and their roster building strategy. And as we clearly saw, it didn't work. Now, moving further down this rabbit hole, we would then further see the Lions GMs, again, whether it was Millen, Mayhew, or whether it was Quinn, they would all make bad decisions for the Lions on a multitude of factors. Whether it was because they were listening to outside influences, whether they were trying to build mainly through free agency, whether they were trying to, ingrain a culture here that didn't work because it wasn't indigenous to the city of Detroit. Regardless of whatever the reason was, it all stemmed back to the same damn problem. Impatience. They were all trying to get fast results. They were all trying to get quick fixes rather than getting the right fix, rather than getting the good results. And if you think about it, if you go back and you think about this realistically, it's been kind of crazy how this whole process has played itself out. Let's go back to Matt Millen when he first got into the job in the 2000s. Matt Millen, the reason why he didn't work very well is because he listened to outside influences in regards to the draft strategy. Matt Millen had by far the most bizarre draft strategy that I have ever seen out of a GM. He thought, hey, if I just pick the best players from multiple schemes and, just kind of throw it together into a melting pot of a team, it's going to work. The problem was it was going to do one of two things. It was either going to work brilliantly or it was going to absolutely fail in utmost disaster. And obviously we know which way it went. The problem is that by doing that, the team had no cohesion. It had no firm, solid base of a scheme. And you had these coaches that are like, what the hell do we do with all these players that have no scheme, association with one another? So that's where Matt Millen went wrong. Then you go into Martin Mayhew. Now, Martin Mayhew, what he decided to do that was wrong, what he decided to do that was impatient, is he thought, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to get a team that is centered around a couple of star players rather than building an entire team. He was going to, focus on star players. And when Martin Mayhew was the GM, the star players were primarily three guys: Stafford, Sue, and Megatron. The rest of the team was pretty much kind of like, whatever. It was mostly mediocre. There was one year when it was really good, which was 2014. But realistically, the rest of the years that the Lions had under Martin Mayhew, it really wasn't much of a solid overall team. It was just a couple of stars that was really propelling the team forward. That's where Martin Mayhew went wrong. He thought, hey, if I just have a few stars, that's going to make this work. No, you have to build the entire team up. That is a time-consuming process. You can't just hope that star players are going to be the ones that make the team work. That's not going to work. And then we saw in Bob Quinn, the most recent, Yahoo out of this whole situation, he was more interested in bringing in players that were expatriates that would toe the line for his buddy in Matt Patricia. What they were trying to do is they were trying to quickly implement their Patriot way culture here in Detroit rather than trying to build a culture the right way that was indigenous here to Detroit. It's a lot harder to come up with a culture that actually works for a place rather than saying, oh, we're going to transplant a culture that worked over here and try and put it in here. That's the easy way. It's much harder to do it the original old-fashioned way. And Quinn and Patricia thought, hey, if we just force it down over here, it's going to work. It never did work. In fact, if anything, it was completely and utterly rejected. But again, regardless of the intent, regardless of the action that was taken by each one of these, regimes, GMs, coaches, whatever the case was, they were all trying to look for a shortcut. They were all trying to find success like lightning in a bottle. And as time went by, the impatience that these GMs had constantly been using to try and fix the Lions, it only got the Lions into a deeper hole. Because rather than doing the hard work that was needed to be done, they wanted to try and find success by going the easy route. So now we get to where Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have come into place. And we all know how much hard work they have put into fixing and transforming, metamorphosizing this roster. All the years of great draft classes and hard work in scouting. All of the culture building that they have done since day one since they gotten in the door. And now the Lions have gone all in. And they've done it in multiple ways. It's not just been in when most people think all in by terms of money. First and foremost, when the Lions hired Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell, they came in, it was immediately noticed that their process, their style of management was completely different from those the management styles of the past. Because Holmes recognized right away that due to the years of mismanagement that the Lions had been under from the previous regimes, there was not going to be an easy way to fix this. It was going to take time. It was going to take a lot of hard work to make the Lions successful. And what he was going to also notice, and what we found out really right away is that the Lions were going to have to go through an immense trial by fire. It's like, listen, there's going to be a lot of dark days ahead where we've got to try and get through this, but we're going to have to keep our head down and keep going to work. Then you have to think about it this way. Holmes decided, again, not to act in haste. He decided to be patient. He decided to be meticulous with his planning, meticulous with his drafting, meticulous with his work. He decided to devote every ounce of attention and care he could to turn the roster around to ensure that the Lions had the best pieces they possibly could acquire that would fit the team. Which then brings us to Campbell. For Campbell, what he decided to do by going all in is that he was going to have to put all of his heart, all of his energy into the players that he had, sharing their experiences, sharing their struggles, sharing their triumphs, being connected with them and leading them from up front rather than behind. That's an all-out commitment, and it was needed from Dan Campbell, and he has more than delivered that energy. He has more than delivered that commitment to his players. The second way that the Lions have gone all in is in the form of collaboration. Again, this was a huge issue that previous regimes with the Lions could never ever seem to figure out. You have to have a complete and collaborative process to identify the best possible route for a team. And that also requires by finding the best person for the team. Now, notice how I said person, because think about it. When the Lions fired both Bob Quinn and Matt Patricia, Sheila did something that neither her father or her mother did. She got involved. She went to meetings. She sat in on them to find out, to know what was going on and how the process was going. She wasn't necessarily intervening and deciding to say, oh, I want it this way. No, she was listening. She was paying attention to what was going on, listening to people who knew what the hell they were talking about. And so she listened to the counsel of guys like Chris Spielman and Barry Sanders. Because of that collaboration, she made the right choice when she decided to go out and hire Brad Holmes. And then likewise in turn, Brad Holmes and Sheila made the right decision when they went out and they hired Dan Campbell. Again, collaboration, cohesion, working together. When you go all in and you decide, hey, listen, we're going to work together as a team, you would be amazed the amount of results you're going to get. And so the Lions learned, finally, that the best way to maximize, optimize results is by hearing all sides of the equation. And that means including all parties. Even if you may not agree with them, you need to listen to what they have to say because they might give you a different perspective that maybe you didn't hear in the first place. And by doing this, the Lions have gotten the best GM and best head coaching tandem duo that they've had probably since the days of Schmidt and Fontes in the 1990s. Or Fonts, pardon me. I know sometimes I mispronounce his name. The third way that the Lions showed that they were going all in was not by being intimidated by others about their process or how they ran things. Again, like I said, Matt Millen, it seemed like any time that he was in the draft process, he always listened to freaking Mel Kiper's big board suggestions. It was never like he ever made a decision solely about himself. It was like, who's the best person on Mel Kiper's board? That's who we're going with. Well, think about it. Holmes and Campbell, they came in and they had a lot to prove. They had a lot to prove, not only to the city of Detroit, but also to the fans, the media, the players, and obviously the NFL. Now, some of the players that were still there from obviously the toxic regime that was there previously with Bob Quinn and obviously Matt Patricia. When you think about it, Holmes and Campbell had to invest themselves into those players to let them know, listen, this is not the same rodeo that you guys just saw walk out the door. We're different. We're going to prove to ourselves to you guys that we're different, so that way you guys will invest in us just like we're investing in you. Then they had to prove it to the fans and the media, and sometimes that took a little bit longer sometimes it took a little bit longer than what was necessary for some people, because some people, they jumped right on in. Others, it was like, listen, I want to see results. I want to see the wins. They didn't want to talk about the morale victories. They didn't want to talk about the Herculean efforts that Campbell's players were putting out on the field. They wanted to see wins. That's what they wanted to see. And until they saw the wins, they weren't going to fully buy on in. But as we all know, the players never wavered from Coach Campbell. They never wavered from GM Brad Holmes. They stayed resolute because they weren't going to let others influence the process that were outside of the building, whether it was the fans, whether it was the media, whoever the case might be. And you have to think about it. The biggest vote of confidence towards this whole process that I'm talking about was when Sheila decided to step in front of the camera when the Lions, I think, were 1-5, 1-6 at the beginning of 2022. And she said she still trusted Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. She still trusted the process, and she was not going to make any changes despite the persistent questions of job security for both of them. To stay committed to something when everyone else is questioning you, when you are under trial by fire, when your feet are being put to the fire, believing in others during that moment shows how fully committed to the process you are by being all in. And now, the final way that the Lions have gone all in is by sticking to their guys, retaining their core players. This is something that Holmes and Campbell have stated since day one, that if you work hard and that if you do what is asked of them, if you fit that mindset, there will always be a place for you here in Detroit. But why is this important? It's important because you have to go back to actually how truly bad the Lions were at retaining their players versus replacing them. Think about it. Until Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes officially actually came into Detroit, we were never holding on to players very, very long. Most of the players that we would draft, we didn't let them stick around freaking past their rookie contract. They were gone usually by the end of their rookie contract. If you realistically want to think about it, from what I can think of, just off the top of my head here, the only Lions players within the last 20-something years that we've actually drafted and, kept through like the first part of their contract, their rookie contract, would probably be Stafford and Megatron. That was it. The rest of them were usually gone, got cut, whatever the case might be. That right there ought to tell you something, how bad the Lions were at retaining their talent that they were drafting. It also might want to show you that how bad we were at actually drafting players. Oh, pardon me, I forgot one other. Taylor Decker. Sorry. The whole point of the matter is that we typically were not doing a very good job in the past of retaining players that we were drafting. It just wasn't happening. But ever since Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have come in, the only time that we've lost a player or have not retained a player that we've drafted is one. That's Chase Lucas. He's the only guy that Brad Holmes has drafted that's no longer with the team. Every other draft pick that the Lions have drafted still remains with the team at this current moment that I'm recording this video. That's impressive. That right there is yet again another testament to Brad Holmes' drafting strategy, but it also shows again that the Lions figured out that, hey, the best way to build a team is to retain the talent that you're drafting. Yes, obviously you want to go out into free agency and you want to supplement the team with outside free agents. But if you're looking towards free agency to be what builds your team, there's a problem there. Because first and foremost, that's the more expensive route, but also that's not going to give you the long-term results you're looking for. But then on top of that, like I said very early on in this little part of this segment, the Lions have shown that they are going to keep the guys that are important to them. And they did that in 3 big ways this offseason. Extending Jared Goff, extending Amon-Ra St. Brown, and extending Penei Sewell. 2 of the 3 of those guys were draft picks by Brad Holmes. So pretty much what Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell said is, listen, if you do your job, if you play well for us, you're going to be set. You're going to be done right by the Detroit Lions. We're going to keep you in town. We're going to pay you. You're going to be given that contract you're looking for. That goes a long way to further reinforcing how much things have changed, how different things are for the Detroit Lions. And when you think about it, all the points that I have drawn out, everything that I have explained here, it shows how the Lions are going to make that Super Bowl run. Because when you go through this entire process of change, you've now got all the elements necessary to make a Super Bowl run. You have a cohesive, united, connected roster that fully believes, it's fully bought into the process, it's fully bought into the coach, number 1. Number 2, it also has the team set with one goal in mind, because this is what Dan Campbell said, I see Super Bowl. And now everybody's on board. Everybody trusts the process. Everybody has seen all of the work that Dan Campbell, Brad Holmes, Chris Spielman, Sheila, all of them have done. And it's now come to a head where the Lions can finally take all of that work, all of that patience, and actually step forward and get that Super Bowl victory. That's why I'm saying the Lions are on the verge of a Super Bowl victory, because they have gone all in every way possible. But having said that, I'm going to end the segment. I hope you all enjoyed it. I just want to say thank you all for watching another episode of MCM Motor City Mania. If you like what you saw, by all means, I highly encourage y'all to watch the next episode. Also encourage y'all to do one of these 3 things: like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If by chance you subscribed in the past, forgot to do so at the time, or you just subscribed and not had a chance to do so, again, highly encourage y'all please to subscribe to the channel. It helps me out. But I also encourage y'all please make sure you also hit that bell notification icon at the bottom of the page, so that way you guys never miss any more content that I push out. Also encourage y'all please to share this content with your Lions friends and family members. Share it here on YouTube, share it on Twitter, share it on Facebook, share it anywhere and everywhere you can with everybody and anybody that you can. The more we share it, the greater the channel grows and the greater the channel spreads. And with that being said to everybody, I hope y'all enjoyed the content. Hope y'all are doing well. Hope y'all got something that makes you happy, makes you smile. And with that being said, I just want to say everyone, God bless. And until the next time we meet, I'll see you all in the next episode.